Madam President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent I be recognized for such time as I shall consume.
Without objection.
Madam President, in July, the Senate passed the fiscal year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act with 86 senators from both sides of the aisle voting in support of it. I'm glad we had such a strong vote because I believe, and I've always believed, it's the most important vote and most important bill that we do all year. The NDAA, as we call it, that stands for National Defense Authorization Act, is how Congress provides the policy and resources for our national defense for the ensuing year. And it always passes by a bipartisan bill, and it has now for 60 years in a row. Well, not quite 60, it's 59 years. It'll be 60 when this bill is concluded. There's not much we do around here anymore on a bipartisan basis for this long, but the NDAA is special, and here's why. Because each and every American benefits from the bill, each family, each community, in each state. Oklahoma is no exception to this rule. What makes Oklahoma special is this: just as much as this bill takes care of Oklahoma, Oklahoma takes care of the country by the very nature of those things, those functions that we perform each year militarily. As chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I've already been down here a lot and talking about the NDAA and how this bill protects all Americans, how it cares for our military families, and how it gives our military the resources needed to defend this nation. But confession is good for the soul, and I have to admit that as chairman, I made certain that the NDAA did the maximum benefit possible for Oklahoma. So I want to talk a little bit about what the NDAA does for Oklahoma and how what we do in Oklahoma makes the rest of the country more secure, because it does. Oklahoma is home to some of the Department of Defense's most valuable installations and assets, and it's been this way for a better part of a century. It is also the epicenter of public-private collaboration where industry partners and universities and others work in close coordination with our military. The defense programs based in Oklahoma protect our military advantage, making sure that we stay ahead, or I should say better, more accurately now, get ahead of our competitors, especially China and Russia. I think we all understand now China and Russia are the greatest threat facing this nation. And we allowed them to, I don't say this critically of the previous administration, but during the previous administration, we actually had a lot of our military actually suffered some 25% in terms of appropriations during the last 5 years. That would have been from fiscal year 2000 to fiscal year 2015. And so we in some areas are not ahead of China and Russia. I've been around for a long time, a lot older than some of the other people in here, and I remember the administration since World War II, and I always prided ourselves in that we had the very best of everything. We learned the hard way in World War II that would be necessary. So while Oklahomans know the importance of these programs that we have in Oklahoma, not just to our economy, but to our national security, not all Americans may know. So here are a few examples. When our planes fly long distances, sometimes they need to refuel, of course, and this can be in midair. And right now, the KC-135 has been the refueler of choice now for 60 years. It's done a great job. It's one that has lasted and has worked hard since 1956. I remember back during the last administration, the Obama administration, I'm a conservative Republican. I wasn't real fond of the previous administration, but there was one person I really liked, and that was Deborah Lee James. She was the Secretary of the Air Force in the previous administration. And she and I worked hard together with the idea that, we're going to have to do something about the KC-135. It's been around 60 years, so I remember I said when we were at Altus Air Force Base, and that was where we're going to be delivering, that's the first KC-46 to replace the KC-135. And I remember of saying 60 years ago, two wonderful things happened. Number one, my wife Kay and I got married. And number two, the first KC-135 was delivered to Altus Air Force Base. And where is the KC-35, the training and the maintenance base? It's in Oklahoma. Now it's time to update that aircraft. The KC-46 is the next generation tanker. And Oklahoma is going to play a key role in this aircraft as well, thanks to the NDAA. All training for this new aircraft is conducted at Altus Air Force Base in Altus, Oklahoma. And all depot maintenance will be performed at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. The same as the KC-135 maintenance has taken place for the last 60 years. So we will also conduct depot maintenance on the B-21 bomber at Tinker. And the B-21 which is still in a development phase, is going to be vital to our Air Force. It will be a critical part of our deterrence posture, a strong military that lets our enemies know that they can't escape us. This is cutting-edge technology designed to replace a few types of bomber aircraft that have lived in Oklahoma for the past last half century. So what this year's NDAA means is the Air Force will be guaranteeing Tinker's workload for the next 50 years and beyond. I've talked a lot on the floor about the NDAA and about a lot of issues, not all just military, but primarily. But I've never really talked much about what we in Oklahoma do and the great contribution we make. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. The third kind of aircraft we have in Oklahoma are the planes that help our Air Force pilots become the best in the world. And we're talking about our training aircraft. Many of the pilots in our Air Force conduct their pilot training at Vance Air Force Base using aircraft like the T-38. T-38, that plane's been around since 1962. And it's still being used right now as a trainer, but it's outlived its usefulness in terms of training for modern aircraft. We can have all the modern aircraft in the world, but if we're training them with vehicles that are 50, 60 years old, it doesn't train them as well as they should be trained. So we've had the T-38 around for that long period of time. The T-7 is going to be that newest aircraft, and in this year's NDAA, that's the National Defense Authorization Act, this year's NDAA, we ensure we continue to progress on developing this new aircraft. That's the T-7. It'll be flying in the skies over Oklahoma for at least the next probably 6 decades. So right here, Oklahoma is home to aircraft that support 3 critical prongs of our national defense, making sure that we have the skills, and the equipment, and the reach needed to deter and defeat our adversaries for the foreseeable future. But the Air Force is not the only service with a large footprint in Oklahoma. The Army is also a rich part of our military heritage, and Oklahoma military installations help support the Army's #1 modernization priority, which is long-range precision fire. That's the #1 priority of the United States Army right now. These are munitions that will be able to reach across hundreds, if not thousands, of miles and accurately strike targets. They can be used on land, they can be used in the skies, they can be used on seas, and beyond. Unfortunately, this is an area where we've already fallen behind our competitors like China and Russia, but Oklahoma is going to help us catch up. The Paladin Integrated Management System, it's called PIM, P-I-M. The PIM system is a critical piece of this Army modernization effort, and it's based at Fort Sill at our very own Fire Center of Excellence, and it's assembled in Elgin, Oklahoma. Now, this is really important, especially when you know the history. We've been working to build a modern artillery system for decades, first starting back in 1994, and we were then working on to build the Crusader. The Crusader was going to be our artillery system. That was going to be the best one around, and we worked and we invested money in it. The Crusader was going to be our new modern system that would set us up above Russia and China. This is back in 1994. We spent $2 billion on the Crusader. And what happened to it? It was nixed prematurely in 2002, and because it was over budget and we thought the needs of warfare were changing. I never did believe that. I think that Crusader was a good vehicle, and that was what we needed for the next decades to come. But it was gone. And then some of the same mistakes were repeated in the Army's Future Combat System. Now, the Future Combat System is called the FCS, Future Combat System. It was cut in 2009, but it wasn't $2 billion that we had spent on that before we cut it. It was $20 billion. So we actually used $22 billion for a system, artillery system, and we still didn't have one. So billions and billions were wasted, and that's how China and Russia got ahead of us, but not for long, because we are catching up. There are more than just DoD programs based in Oklahoma. Our countless industry partners work there as well to help us make sure our forces are on the cutting edge of innovation. The XQ-58A Valkyrie is an unmanned aerial system that does not need a runway to take off. It will accompany the next generation aircraft like the world-class F-35 on its mission. So it will perform an escort function. It is one that takes off vertically, and it's one without a pilot. So this is one of the Air Force's top priorities, what they call a Vanguard program. It's what the future of air superiority looks like, and it's assembled in, you guessed it, in Oklahoma. That's just one example of the amazing technologies we're building across the state. But it's not just our military installations and industries that are supporting America's national defense. In Oklahoma, we work well together across the state, military, industry, and even educational universities. Down in Lawton, just outside of Fort Sill, we have something called FISTA. We are trying, where we try to get all of these stakeholders together in one building. It's the private sector. And I have to say this about the private sector in Oklahoma. We've gone through through 5 different efforts to change our military, and each one of the 5, these are called BRAC rounds. A BRAC round is Base Realignment and Closure Commission. They meet and they evaluate all of the military installations in the country, in America, and evaluate which ones should be expanded, which ones should be done away with, and which ones should be reduced. And I would say that in the state of Oklahoma, we have 5 major military installations, and we're the only state that has increased with each one of the 5 BRAC rounds since 1987. Now, you might say that's political influence. It's not. It is community support. That's what we have always done. For example, even in our universities, the University of Oklahoma is working on research that will accelerate the work of the Long-Range Precision Fires Air Missile Defense Cross-Function teams at Fort Sill, top modernization priorities for the Army. The FISTA is just one piece of this research and innovation done in Oklahoma. It's really happening all around the state. Oklahoma State University is also conducting critical research on drones, unmanned systems, where our military has growing needs. We're leaders in Oklahoma. This will support operations where traditional methods are not sufficient for takeoffs and landings, ensuring our military can penetrate any environment. We made sure that we committed funding, especially for this kind of research, and Oklahoma State University is a perfect candidate because of the successful work they've already done on these systems. We're ahead of others. And the Tulsa University is designated by the National Security Agency as a cyber center of academic excellence. In this year, the NDAA, the NDAA that we're passing, which is going to be probably in November, latter part of November, it directed the Army Corps of Engineers to forge a partnership with an academic institution like Tulsa University to conduct critical cyber research that will support our national security. TU has a track record of success, and they are certainly a go-to for just this type of research, and I anticipate that is exactly what's going to happen. Our universities really are second to none in terms of this research, and their hard work and ingenuity is going to help us catch up to China and Russia and ensure our military superiority will be there for years to come. With a massive amount of work lined up for the state of Oklahoma, I know our bill had to help communities across the state provide a number of workers needed. One provision we included in to address this allows for the appointment of recently retired members from the armed services members who have retired to assume DOD positions at certain pay rate grades without waiting to the requisite length of time. This ensures more people are going to stay in Oklahoma, that skilled workers won't need to leave the state to find work. These are people who know the programs best. That's what they've spent a career doing. And they're going to be able to continue working on them even after their transition out of active duty. That's all in this defense authorization bill that we're under consideration today, that we're going to pass. Our work ethic is just one of the trademarks for Oklahomans I'm lucky to represent. Another is what we call the Oklahoma Standard. Oklahomans know how important it is to care for and support each other, especially our military families. Our military families don't have it easy. The nature of the job means frequent moves around the country and around the world. This means that they make a lot of sacrifices. We can't ask military spouses to sacrifice as well. So what we've done, actually we started in last year's defense authorization bill. We put in a program at that time that helps families, spouses and families, circumvent some of the timely waits that they have to have when they move into a new occupation. Now, we've done the same thing. That was in last year's bill. One way we did it was by extending the DOD program to reimburse spouses for the cost of new professional licenses and credentials. Now, this year, we improved on that. We made it easier to transfer those licenses across state lines. You couldn't do that until after this bill is passed. We know that when we improve family readiness, we improve overall military readiness. I have to say, you hear people there are a lot of people around here that don't think we need as strong a military as we need. And they talk about this, they'll hear the statement, I've heard it 100 times, they say, we spend more on our military than China and Russia do put together. Well, there's a reason for that. In our military, we look out after the troops, after the individuals. And we have, about the housing problems that we've had. We've spent a lot of money in correcting that problem, and we are doing that at the current time. We have schools for the kids of our troops, educational facilities. And so that's, now in Russia and China, in a communist country, they give them a gun and say, go out and shoot people. And that's it. The last thing I want to point out about this year's NDAA is also a readiness issue. We made sure this year that we will not have a BRAC round. I mentioned a minute ago the BRAC round. That's a Base Realignment and Closure Commission, and we are not going to have one. Now is not the time to reduce our military footprint any further, and not when we face so many threats around the world, and not when we've worked so hard with President Trump to rebuild and repair our readiness. It's easy to see how these provisions we fought so hard to include in this bill are going to help Oklahomans and really all Americans. And that's why I think the NDAA, the most important bill of the year, not only for Oklahoma, but for the rest of the nation as well. Serving as chairman of the Armed Services Committee and representing Oklahomans are the two things I'm most proud of. I'm proud that we can do right by our armed forces and Oklahomans with this year's NDAA. The next step is making this bill law. The next step is going to take place when our colleagues from the House have a conference report. I think most people know that in a bill like this, the Senate passes the bill, then the House passes the bill, then there's a conference report. And they have to get together and have a conference. And it's not going to be easy because there are a lot of differences to iron out. And for those who want to know what's going to happen, for that conference report, the House is not going to appoint their conferees until November 16th. So it's going to be a while. It doesn't matter. The deadline is actually December 31st, and that will happen. It's happened for 60 years in a row, and it's going to continue to happen this time. So no matter what, we're going to get it done. We have, for the last 59 years, we're going to do it again. I was talking to Tinker Air Force Base today, and they were talking about the things that they're needing to do. And at Tinker Air Force Base, that's turned into probably one of the, I believe it's the largest military complex in the country. And they're doing incredible work there. I was talking to the whole team, and they were talking about what they are preparing for the next year. And I can assure you, it's all going to be good, and Oklahoma's going to fare well. We're going to fare well in our equipment and in our training. And I'm proud of Oklahoma's contribution to the safety of America, and we're doing a good job out in Oklahoma. With that, I yield the floor